Do you know what happens when you try to boil a frog? If a frog is suddenly put in a pot of boiling water, it will immediately think, "This is extremely painful. I need to get out of here now," and it will jump out right away. But if you take that same frog and put it in a pot of cold water, place the pot on the stove, and start heating it up slowly, the frog will relax. It thinks, "It's getting warmer in here, but a little extra warmth won't hurt," and it keeps that thought until it eventually gets boiled. Unfortunately, we are not much different. Many things in life accumulate gradually: debts, excess weight, and poor health, and we fail to notice them until it's already too late. Do not underestimate the little things, for it is often these silent killers that lead to our demise.
What's going on, my friends? You have tuned in to yet another episode of Real English Radio. I'm your host, Tony Kaizen, and I know the title of this episode might be a bit strange, but if you can listen to the entire episode, then you'll understand how this applies to you as an English learner. The creator of this video starts by describing two different ways of boiling a frog, which, as I'm sure you can see, is meant to be taken as a metaphor. If you drop the frog into a pot of boiling water, it'll immediately think, "This is way too hot and uncomfortable. I've got to get out of here." And it'll jump out of the pot. Conversely, if you drop the frog into a cold pot of water and then gradually increase the heat, the frog will certainly perceive the change in temperature, but it won't be enough to make it want to jump out of the pot. And this concept can be applied to any aspect of our lives. You might have the poor habit of spending money on things that you don't really need. $1 here, $5 there, $20 more there. And it's only when you swipe your debit card and it gets declined, or you look at your bank account and realize that you don't have enough money to pay rent this month, that you feel the consequences of your unhealthy spending habits. And at that point, it's a little too late to do anything about your financial situation. Or maybe your vice is junk food. So you have the habit of eating cookies and ice cream every night before bed. Or you're constantly eating fat and greasy food because it tastes so good. You're not going to feel the effects of this at first, but after about a year of this, you'll notice that it's harder to put on the same jeans you've always worn. Your favorite shirt doesn't fit you the same way. And then you look at yourself in the mirror and think, "When the hell did I get this big?" And at that point, you obviously can't just snap your fingers and go back to the size you used to be. The same thing with your health. I know all of my smokers can relate. You started off smoking just 1 or 2 cigarettes a day, then a pack a day, and eventually 2 packs a day. Now, you certainly won't feel the negative effects of your smoking habit immediately, but after smoking 2 packs a day for 30 years, you might find yourself getting diagnosed with cancer. Cancer that could have been avoided had you simply been more thoughtful about your daily habits. And the creator of this video clip ends his thought by suggesting that we do not underestimate the little things in life, the small decisions, because it's often the accumulation of those small decisions that lead to our demise, our downfall, if you will. And although I can clearly see the logic in this way of thinking, I take a slightly different approach to the idea. Is there's really no such thing as a small decision. Spending $2 is just as significant as spending $20,000. Eating steak and vegetables is just as significant as eating cookies and ice cream. Smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day is just as significant as running 2 kilometers a day. The only difference is that we feel the effects of our decisions at different times, and therefore think that they have different levels of importance. We don't think twice about spending $3 on a cup of coffee, but we'll take weeks, if not months, before choosing to buy a $20,000 car. Now, losing $3 a day doesn't feel anywhere near as bad as getting a $20,000 car loan and then not being able to make the monthly payments. So we treat those decisions differently, even though they can both have equally devastating effects over the course of our lives. And you may not feel the effect of spending $20 on a meal today, and therefore think there's nothing wrong with that. But if you think about all of your purchases in that way, you're going to run out of money very quickly, because sooner or later, things add up. And you may not gain 50 kilos after eating 1 pint of ice cream and 3 cookies, but if you do that every night, you're eventually going to need bigger pants. And I'm sure I don't need to reiterate the example with cigarettes. Instead, I'm going to make this relevant to you, someone who's learning English as a foreign language. And when you first start learning a new language, it's often like jumping into a pot of boiling water. You've got to learn new sentence structures, pronunciation patterns, nouns, verbs, adjectives, prepositions, cultural influences, slang, idioms, jokes, and everything in between. All of that can feel extremely overwhelming to someone who's never learned a foreign language before. And many people react to that overwhelming feeling by jumping out of the proverbial pot of boiling water. In other words, they say, "This is just too much. I quit." And they go back to a language and a culture that's familiar to them because it's simply less stressful. What they don't realize is that they've essentially jumped into a pot of cold water where things are comfortable enough to rest in one place. They scroll on their phones, watch Netflix, go out with friends on the weekends, and live their lives as if it's going to be the same forever. But one day, they realize that the economy is starting to get worse. No big deal, right? I've got my job. I can pay my rent. I can still go out with friends and have a few beers, they think to themselves. The temperature of the water has increased slightly, but not enough for them to take action. Not long after that, they hear a few of their coworkers in the office speaking English to each other. No big deal, right? I don't need English to do my job. I don't live in an English speaking country. And besides, their English isn't that good anyway. I could get to that level if I wanted to, they think to themselves. The temperature of the water has increased yet again, but not enough for them to take action. 6 months later, they get an email from their superior saying that the company will be downsizing and shifting its focus to the international market. Thus, the most valuable employees will be those who speak English proficiently, regardless of their technical skill set, because English is the international language of business and trade. So all employees must be able to process information and communicate in English. Once again, the water gets hotter, and now they're really starting to feel the heat. They start following English teachers on social media and watching a few Netflix series in English, telling themselves that they're learning, but not doing much more than that. And not even a month later, they get told that they're being fired because even though they're very good at their jobs, they're still one of the few employees who cannot communicate in English proficiently. Now, at this point, the water's boiling, and they immediately get online to buy some courses and look for a private English teacher, thinking that this is going to save them and change their lives within the next 30 days. I'm sure I don't have to explain how this situation could have been avoided. And I can't tell you how many times I've helped someone who came to me because they found themselves in this exact situation. And the point of this episode is not that you should get your shit together before it's too late. The point is that consistency will work for or against you. And it all depends on the choices you make. The same way people tend to jump into language learning only to get overwhelmed, quit, and eventually suffer the consequences because they were too comfortable to notice the world gradually changing around them, we can take the same approach of gradual change and apply it to get the positive outcomes we want. Instead of trying to read an entire book about psychology the first month you start learning a language, why not just read 1 to 2 pages of a children's book every day? Instead of trying to understand a 2-hour podcast without a transcript or subtitles, why not just watch one 60-second video every day? Instead of trying to write an entire essay, why not just write a few paragraphs every day? Instead of trying to talk about the meaning of life with a native speaker, why not just start by making small talk for 10 minutes a day? You may feel a little stressed at first, but not enough to feel like you should quit. And every month, you can increase the level of difficulty just a bit. 10 pages of a book, 30 minutes of a podcast episode, writing 2 pages in your journal, and speaking with someone for 60 minutes. So many people struggle to make progress with English because they refuse to respect the process. They want it all right now, and they want it for free. And I'm not just talking about money. When I say free, I mean they don't want to put in the time and energy consistently over the course of years to reach a level of proficiency. What people don't realize is that consistency is just another word for training. With every action you take, you are training yourself to repeat that action at some point in the future. So you can train yourself to avoid the stress of learning a new skill and deal with the consequences later. Or you can train yourself to approach the learning process by starting with the basics and gradually increasing the level of difficulty over time and deal with the consequences later. It's really up to you.